distract you.
Yeah, exactly. So he's the author of the Inner CEO, a book in which he describes how to stop the mind from playing the tricks that it sometimes seems to be playing on us, calm it down, and find the clarity that we need to make a bigger impact. So, hey Shane, good to see you. How are you today?
Good to see you, Michael. I'm good. I'm good. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm ready to have hopefully. Let's see where this conversation goes about clarity and the mind and the inner CEO. We'll see. I'm coming in unscripted, and we'll see where we go.
So, is that kind of the usual state you're in, just while letting the day flow by and look what happens, and kind of trying to deal with whatever comes your way?
No, I think, I suppose my current approach, and it kind of like, I suppose maybe like most people, maybe you evolve your approach over time from experience or depending on the circumstances you're in or what your goals are. But at the moment, like my general approach is I'll kind of identify 3 important things that relate to my near and long-term kind of priorities, and I'll work on those at the moment. So for example, today, this is one of my priorities today, actually, right? So I want to make sure I was in the right state for that. So I made sure I create space before this call just to kind of relax my mind, get into zone. So you were one of my 3. And the other 2 was I spent an hour recording an audiobook, which is called Inspire Me, coming out in September. And then the second thing that was a priority for me was doing some research on an area that I'm very interested in, which is around the degradation of attention. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it probably will inform some of our discussion, maybe because it's fresh in my mind. But and then in between, then I'm doing kind of standard stuff. I had a meeting with a client. I had 2 meetings with clients, and then I had just administration, boring stuff to be doing, finance, all that kind of stuff. So for me, generally, as I'm talking to you, I generally try and keep the mornings pretty focused on high value time. And then the afternoons definitely are a little bit more flexible. Yeah.
I was curious about the one of the earlier parts that you mentioned, like you try to get into the zone right before heading into that conversation. So and as we just heard, I mean, you seem to have a very busy day, like I mean most of us, and it's also very kind of chaotic times out there. So there's lots of distractions coming our way from kind of outside of the schedule that we have anyway. So what do you specifically do to get in in that zone? Because I can imagine that that's a problem that many of the viewers also would have, like having to head into kind of a keynote, an important meeting, an important conversation, coming from kind of a hectic day, but then having to be on the spot with a calm mind heading into that important appointment.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of angles to what you're asking me. I think ultimately it comes down to seeing the world a certain way and understanding how we work inside as humans. So you mentioned my book, The Inner CEO. That's kind of an introduction to how I would look at that. But having spent the last 25, almost 30 years actually, in the work that I do, and also in the area of the mind and the inner game, what I'm very clear on is that actually flow is an innate state. So if we don't interfere with it, like if you look at kids, a lot of the time kids are in a natural flow. They move from one thing to the next. They don't overthink. If they get upset, but then they very quickly could be happy 30 seconds later. Mm. We're not fixed in mindsets. And whether it's to, people have different opinions on this, whether it's to education or society or conditioning or cultural effects, maybe that's knocked out of us and we're very much up in our heads. And so the more thinking we are, the busier our minds. In my experience, you get knocked out of flow. So I'm very clear in terms of my understanding as to what gets the best out of me. And also I'm working in it every day. So I get a chance to test things out with people, test things out with myself, see what actually works. Not just theory, not just what I read in the book, but actually what actually is making a difference here. So in a very simple terms, I'm very clear, like you just said there, like life seems to be getting busier. There's a lot more distractions. I talked about attention degradation earlier on. Our attention is being compromised. I've got amazing devices like this thing and this thing, but if I don't manage them, that they are actually consuming the one thing that's most valuable that actually businesses want, which is your attention. But there's a price, there's a cognitive degradation, but also there's a flow degradation. So, people are more and more interested in the flow. And I used to be very much thinking about there's certain things I need to do to get the flow. What I've realized for me anyway, and for my clients, is the less I do, the more I'm in flow. So how do I prepare for the flow? Well, I can get caught up with the busy mind. First of all, I know the busy mind is the enemy of the flow, of being in that state. So it's coming up then. Once you realize that, you realize, okay, what are ways for me to get out of my thinking, out of that busy mind? And it's really to cultivate the skill of what I would say is 3C state, which is calm, clear, and centered. Now, there's many ways you can do that. But for me, the ultimate way of doing that is to realize that it's my thinking is getting in the way. So therefore, if I can see that clearly and then just let that thinking go. So in terms of preparing for something like this, I've had to say about different things on today, 5 or 6 things. When you do that, there's all sorts of thoughts associated with that around you. If you're not clear about what I just said, you don't see any problem. But I see a problem before this because I want to get rid of all that. So you step away. I go outside. My office here is right beside a river. I step outside for a few minutes. In this case, I might even go for a short walk. And I literally just let my mind relax. I don't bring my phone. In a way, I kind of almost let my mind go into what I would call kind of free flow mode. It can wander wherever it wants. It can kind of graze in the grass over here, over there. But I'm consciously saying, okay, I'm just letting go of all my thinking associated with what's happened this morning, with what's coming today or tomorrow, even the problems around me, of which there's numerous problems, business and personal, that's life. And then I feel myself kind of coming into this spot. And that for me is what I'd say is that's what I call the seat of the inner CEO. It's that seat of centered awareness where it's a feeling.
What I find interesting about that is, so coming from a communication perspective, is that that very much sounds like kind of being present in the moment. I mean, despite our day being full of kind of decisions that need to be made, appointments that we have to make, negotiations and speeches, and on all this stuff. So there's a lot going on in our day. But kind of the most charismatic persons that I recall are those who give me kind of the impression that right in this moment that we are having this conversation, nothing else matters to them. So they can seem to be able to get rid of all the other things that could be important in that moment and not let them be distracted by them and fully focus on what's in that moment. So is that what you're speaking of?
Yes, it is. I mean, I think it's very much about that skill of being in the present moment. I guess a couple of points around what you're saying is that, so if you're talking about, say, a great politician, or say, as you say, a very charismatic leader, it's very often you'll hear that phrase that make you feel like you're the only person in the room. So that's high level of attention, which is a skill in that context. But what you'll find with that person is they may have unconsciously developed that ability in one area of their life. Mm-hmm. And so they haven't identified it as the variable that I'm talking about. And so therefore, when you go into another area of their life, it's very common to find that they don't do that they don't apply the same level of attention. And I suppose what I've realized myself is that ability, yes, you can cultivate it. It's as a result of, being in the present sounds almost like a bit silly sometimes. You think, well, I'm here, so am I not in the present? Well, as we all know now, more and more, you can be here, but mentally be somewhere else, which is all too common. And so that's why I would say to everybody that everything you do is practice. You go out on the golf course, it's practice. You have a conversation with your son or your daughter, your wife, your husband, your boyfriend, your girl. Can you be present? Other than just a high-stakes situation where you're trying to make an impression or you're trying to connect with somebody, in a way, that's almost easier. I think when the pressure's on, it's easier to be present because you're forced to be present.
Yeah.
The pressure. although in certain contexts, obviously like elite sports, that is almost where the marginal gain or loss is. What's more interesting to me is to be present when there's no pressure.
Or the pressure is somewhere else, right? That there are
Exactly.
like two competing areas that both kind of let us feel like we're under pressure here, and we need to focus on that one, but the others just keeps knocking on on our minds and tries to distract us.
Exactly. And again, even the way you're describing that, like, what is that? Like, a feeling of pressure means that there's a lot of thinking in your mind, or there's thinking that's actually agitating you, that's creating pressure. So once you start to make the link between your feeling and your thinking, I mean, there could be a specific thought that's worrying you or causing pressure, right? And then you go, okay, let me look at that. Maybe I need to take some action, or maybe I just need to let it go. But then also there's another factor, which is the volume of thinking. And this is the kind of I think, an emerging phenomenon, that the volume of thinking in society seems to be going up. And it's to do with, dare I say, even things like LinkedIn and social media, email, text. It's just relentless. And so in a way, we're kind of training our mind to be exceptionally busy, switching into different modes all the time, agitation to thinking. So you get this cloud storm of thought. And then we go home and try to be present. Think, why can't I be present? I mean, logically, you've trained your mind the entire day to do the opposite. How could it be present? So I think the challenge now, the opportunity is for business leaders to recognize the criticality of this in a business context, because by training and encouraging people to become more present during the workday, you actually improve their attention. And I don't know, anybody's going to argue against the fact that if you get better attention in the workforce, that's going to mean better productivity. It's going to mean better creativity.
Absolutely.
It's actually going to mean more enjoyable work.
So, but I want to dig a little bit deeper here, because I mean that's certainly easier said than done, right? So just let go of the distracting thoughts. Just be more present. Just be more attentive to the present moment. But how do you do that exactly? So what are some tools or methods that we can use that at least light us a path towards that, or make it easier for us to at least taste that state of being more present?
Actually, it's funny, I'm laughing because I just had a flashback as you were talking to me when I was kind of early on this kind of journey, this inner journey. And I remember somebody I respected saying, no, you just let it go. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How do you let it go? And I'm like, what does that even mean? This guy is crazy. And now here I am saying, let it go. I think, look, it's like everything that if you're taking up a skill like playing the guitar, like I know you're a musician, you play guitar, probably other things, Michael, but you start off, and at the start, you're practicing and it kind of hurts and it's awkward and maybe your fingers hurt. But with practice then and practice, all of a sudden now you're progressing in the skill and you're going up the learning curve of the skill. And I think it's to understand that actually there are many inner skills. And so to get clear, to have clarity in the moment, there's a learning curve. And in a way, it's not to make it hard, it's just that there is a learning curve to everything. And there's a degree of mastery that comes then over time, like a guitar, where you feel all of a sudden now you get to a certain point with a musical instrument where you can actually then start to improvise a bit. There's a degree of mastery. And so there is that journey on the inner side. And so for me, like when I'm talking to clients about this, and once we establish that I'm not completely crazy, and they kind of buy into what I'm talking about, then it's down to, okay, well, look, where do we start? Now, I think the simplest one of all, first of all, is to understand, I use an analogy, and I use this in the book, The Inner CEO, where I say your mind is like a snow globe. And metaphors are very powerful. So we have the snow globe there, and I kind of communicate around the business that most people wake up in the morning, their mind's calm. First thing they do is probably pick up the phone, and they don't realize they're doing this. And so straight away, the mind your clarity's gone. And so even that could make them go, oh, hold on a second. And so it's probably somebody watching this where they might go, hang on a second here. That makes sense. And their mind automatically might start to calm with no technique, which I find interesting. Having said that, technique, like for example, most people now will be familiar with mindfulness to a degree, and meditation as well. Both of those kind of really ramped up in terms of popularity during the pandemic, which was good because it's making people more exposed to the starting point of a calm mind. But to me, they're almost like it's just the earlier starting point. So a simple mindfulness technique could be just to stop and take in a few deep breaths. So even if somebody's listening to this, they could actually stop. They could listen to me or listen to you. Yet they could also just take in 3 deep breaths and really feel the breathing. They could step outside for a few minutes and just focus on their breath. If they want to go to a step 2, then they could actually tune into each of the senses. So tune into what you see for a few seconds, what you hear, feel your breath, feel your back against the chair, feel your feet on the ground, maybe then taste and smell. So you're getting the 5 senses there. And as you know,
and even that seems to be hard for some people nowadays, because I mean, even if that's like just taking you 5 to 10 seconds or so, to just pay attention to those. I mean, how distracting is that phone really to you? How nagging is that feeling? Like, I need to check that new mail or that notification, or when was that meeting again, or is that contract now approved? Like, even just paying attention to ourselves for 10 seconds, or let's say a minute or 2, can feel scary to a lot of people who are busy and constantly kind of exposed to media attention and media influx.
Yeah, well, look, I guess we're the first generation to have to deal with this level of information explosion. And as they say, to do like any addiction, the first step in recovery is to see that you have a problem. And so if somebody's could be feeling, well, I'm just really busy, I feel stressed, my sleep isn't great, I kind of feel disconnected, I find it really hard to just be present, like it just seems there's not enough hours in the day. What I'm going to say is, okay, I get it, but if your life is busy, it's primarily because your mind is busy. If you have a calm mind, like, I'm not saying that you walk around, sometimes people make this connection, which is, oh, hang on, if I calm down, I won't get all the work done. I think it's the opposite. My experience is that's the opposite. So I could be in a very busy day, but be very calm in that day. So it's to do with what's happening. Is there agitation as I'm going through my day, or is there a degree of calmness? But I think the understanding is key here, Michael. That you have to kind of see, like, once you understand, oh, hold on, that makes sense. And what's the benefit of clarity then? Well, look, the benefit of this is that you have a calmer nervous system, first of all. That's so calmer nervous system, calmer brain, better immune system, just on a very logical level. All the research shows that. So, and I think it's kind of common sense. So the question is, okay, hang on, people assume
that's the irony. It's common sense, and everyone knows that, and yet we're so bad at actually honoring that common sense, right? We're just, okay, yeah, it's just a quick glance. It's just, well, this time, or maybe even more arrogant stance, like, so I'm a bit smarter than other people, so I can handle a little bit more load on my mind, right? But in reality, it might not be the case. So it might be that, yeah, we think that we make a good decision even in a distracted and kind of shaky mind, but in reality, or if we would just compare it to the decisions that we made when our mind was calm, we would probably see that reality is a little bit different from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why people like going on holidays, if they let themselves switch off, which a lot of people unfortunately don't, but they still stay connected to work and things like that. But, if you go out for a hike on hills without your phone for half a day, you will feel different. So what is that? What is that? And I think that's the challenge in front of us. If you say to most people, listen, is it bad to have a stressed mind? They'll all probably go, yeah, it is, yeah. But if you say, is it bad to have a busy mind? A lot of people go, was that not just part of modern life? And I'll say, well, it might be, but actually there's another option, which is to have a calm, clear mind, even within a busy life. And then you go back to where we started. You enjoy life more. You have better thinking. You don't feel under pressure all the time. And as a result, physically you're better, mentally you're better, emotionally you're better, and even dare I say it, spiritually, you're probably better in terms of you're more in tune with your deeper sense of self, your own kind of inner GPS system, your emotional compass. They're kind of more aligned. And then the other thing you said, in terms of like just going outside and being distracted, I was looking at some of the research actually I mentioned earlier on that I was doing about attention. So I don't know if I said this to you before, because obviously we would talk about different things all the time, but I don't know if I asked you this, like there's research showing that what's the average amount of time that an office worker can work on one thing without getting interrupted, either by a person or by interrupting themselves through looking at something else like email or text or whatever? What's the average amount of time?
It must be very low, like 1-digit minutes or so, like 5 minutes or so.
It's 3 minutes, yeah.
3. Wow.
3 minutes, and it's going down. And then there's other research around that. I think it's American research now. They were saying about 57% of Americans will not read a single book in their lifetime. And that the average amount of time an American spends reading a book is 17 minutes versus 5.5 hours on their phone. So there's all these different things. There's a massive amount of research going on, but the research needs to come into the thinking of leaders, because I think there's an unseen epidemic happening right underneath our feet, which is an epidemic of attention degradation. And I think it's robbing us of ideas and productivity in business. But more importantly, I think it's going to rob us of quality of life. I see it every day. That's kind of people that when I'm meeting people, very often they can be very successful. On the outside looking in, it would seem that they have it all. And they said, I'm missing something. And say, yeah, you're missing something big. Mm-hmm. To go back to where you started here in terms of the ability to be in the present moment. But it's such a pithy phrase. It's kind of become a cliche. Like, what, to your point, like, what does it actually mean? And really, there's a lot of layers around that one phrase. So I think a key bit of it is understanding your mind. It's to understand the role of thinking in relation to your work and your life. And it's to understand that you actually have more influence over your thinking than you realize. And it's critically important that you start to become, like, if you're looking for a better life and a better business, really ultimately it's going to be the leverage is going to be on the inner world, and actually we can see this in the corporate side coming through in terms of it's an increase in awareness around emotional intelligence, the ability to listen, the ability to empathize. These are important skill sets. They're inner skills, but they all link back on some level actually to attention.
Yeah, and that's another very, very striking similarity to communication, right? Where we so many people tend to think that it's about getting your point across, when the opposite is way more important. Paying attention to what's going on around you, and trying to make sense first, and focusing on what matters most, rather than just kind of spitting out ideas in a fast-paced manner, right? And so particularly in a world like ours, where it feels like everyone's got opinions and answers on pretty much everything, but we have kind of a shortage on people who just stop, calm down, and ask the question. So what is the question that we're trying to answer in the first place? And to be able to do that, we probably need to have a calm mind first, so that we can calm down ourselves and then be contagious with that.
Yeah, it's funny. Now that you said that, something else occurred to me. It just occurred to me there that, you could be listening to this thinking, okay, now I got to make a thing out of having a calm mind, a clear mind, right? In a way, it's almost to be okay with having a busy mind as well. Do you know what I mean? Because you could end up having a busy mind. Let's say, to your point, your communication, you're dealing with people who are, you're preparing them to speak in a certain context. But if they're about to go on stage and all of a sudden thinking, oh my God, I got a busy mind, very often somebody will react to that and then make it a problem. Whereas what I'd be saying is, hey, it's okay, you got a busy mind, doesn't matter. Just go out there and do your best. And, because even I was watching that documentary that's just come out about Simone Biles there over the weekend, Simone Biles Rising. And it was very interesting. I thought it was brilliant because it gave a real insight. She's greatest of all time, 37 medals won. It gave a real insight into what it's like to be a high performer and the fact how human she is, and she can have doubts and all that kind of stuff. So she's somebody who was trained to be expert at a certain skill. And obviously she had what she said was a mental health issue at the Tokyo Olympics, and so then stepped away. But then I was watching her. She was doing a beam exercise in the last 9 months, and she was on the beam doing a really good routine, but still her mind was still saying, "Oh, what if you mess up? Or what if the problem comes back?" So you could get caught up with that and say, "Oh, I'm not being present." It doesn't matter, So, but the skill is to kind of let those thoughts come in like a cloud and just let them go out, because that's what I mean. So somebody might have the misunderstanding that being present means you don't have any thinking. That's not my experience. My experience is that maybe the volume of thinking goes down, but you can have all sorts of thoughts will come in. It's more to do with even practicing the guitars we talked about. Can I practice? I still might have a thought that says, this is going nowhere, you're useless. Okay, Grant, ignore, or do I let it take me over? And so that's what I mean. So we could get caught up with, focusing on clarity of just being in the moment. It is more than that, because I mean, like, you could talk, well, some people might say, well, that doesn't matter to me. I'm very clear about my vision. I'm very clear about my goals, and that's enough. And I have found with a lot of high achievers that they can be so focused on a really exciting vision that the vision drags them into the moment. And for a lot of business leaders, that's maybe sometimes a more interesting way for their mind to do it. Now, I'd still be challenging them to cultivate the skill of being present with no goal, because what you'd find with a lot of business achievers, I found anyway, Michael, is that they're very in the moment when they're on the goal. They're very in the moment doing the big pitch.
Yeah.
But then when they're at home and it's not as exciting, they're not in the moment, and they haven't identified it as the key variable in just getting more life into themselves, because it seems to be the thing that actually brings more enjoyment. Like, life mightn't be perfect outside. Whose life is perfect outside? But in the moment, I can squeeze more juice out of my hour, my day.
And the thing with moments is they are moments. They are different, right? Not every moment is the same. And some moments are more exciting. Some are more calm. Some are more fast paced. Some are louder. Some are quieter. And to me, it sounds like, well, that's kind of the art here, to find, to master that inner game, regardless of what the moment currently is, and how your relationship with that moment and with the vision actually is.
And also, I think to watch your ego here as well, in general, for somebody, like, the ego is so sneaky. I've had a flashback there to a conversation somebody months ago where they were saying, well, I did this 1 week retreat about mindfulness, and I've done this training with this person, and I've done this particular course, and I've got this qualification. And I'm like, but why are we talking then? Well, I find it difficult to be in the moment. But the ego can kind of get defensive about it in terms of knowledge. And I just think, if you think about you when you're playing, when you're back in a child just playing a game, that's what we're talking about. It's that free flow mode. It's not kind of sitting going, okay, I need to be present. That's tension. That's the opposite. And so you playing, you probably get into flow easily playing the guitar. We all have something. And so that's the other element that you were asked about, practical steps, is find something in your day or your life that you automatically kind of go into the flow with. And that could be a walk. It could be a sea swim. It could be with the dogs playing. It could be playing guitar. And do that more in your day. And that's a good way to kind of cultivate it, but also know that it's not just the activity, it's the way you are mentally doing the activity. And so it's really I'm more interested in the inner dynamics around that. But if you find yourself in a flow activity with something you naturally, I'll get very carefree. For somebody, it could be reading a book. It's a very common flow activity, reading a fiction book, getting lost in the story. But the dynamic is you let go of your fixed thinking.
And I think that's actually a beautiful wrap up of the discussion, and well, a nice look ahead for us, right? And well, let's just say, don't give everything away. Let people something to explore in your book. So make sure to check out The Inner CEO. And maybe we continue that conversation at some point in the future. It's been really fascinating exploration, and I think lots of lessons to apply to ourselves here. Thanks, Shane. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I enjoyed talking to you as always.
Okay, thanks.